Welcome to Love for the Truth Radio, a program devoted to encouraging you to be a contender of the faith in an ever-changing church culture. On Love for the Truth Radio, we will discuss current issues and challenging views along with biblical truth that can affect our Christian worldview and how we live out our faith. And now, here's your host, Cindy Hartline.
Welcome to the program. Did you know that the governance of the technical experts are on the rise? The community organizers known as the Technocrats are now the gods, the controllers and managers of the planet, nations, as well as the individual people. It's not the politicians, the priests, the pope, the pastors, nor the CEOs, stockbrokers, bankers, or the rich who govern our lives. It's the Technocrats, with the support of the elitists. So rest in peace, democracy, which was the title of our guest podcast that led my interest to talk about this topic on this show. You know, modern technocracy is fulfilling the utopian dream, perfecting society, whereas traditional faith in God as sole provider of redemption, transcendence, has been replaced by reliance on science and technology. And that was a quote from Martine Erdmann. You know, the expert on technocracy is Patrick M. Wood, author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan horse of global transformation. He is also the co-author of Trilaterals Over Washington, Volumes 1 and 2, with the late Antony C. Sutton. Patrick Wood is also the leading and critical expert on sustainable development, green economy, Agenda 21, 2030 Agenda, and historic technocracy. Patrick Wood remains a leading expert on the elitist Trilateral Commission, their policies and achievements in creating their self-proclaimed new international economic order, which is the essence of sustainable development on a global scale. Patrick is a frequent speaker and guest on radio shows around the nation. His current research builds on Trilateral Commission hegemony, focusing on technocracy, transhumanism, and scientism, and how these are transforming global economics, politics, and religion. Welcome, Patrick Wood. It's a pleasure to have you on Love for the Truth Radio again.
Hi, Sandy. It's great to be with you again here.
Pat, you know, we've had a few shows on technocracy. The last one was on the global cities, and it's taken me years to wrap my brain around this stuff, but I just know we want to make it as clear as we can for our audience. So can you briefly explain what technocracy is?
I'm going to give you a definition from 1938, which was offered by Technocrat magazine. They're the official publication of Technocracy Incorporated back in the 1930s. And they said back then, still good now, technocracy is the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. Now, very clearly, this is an economic system. It's about distributing goods and services to the entire population. But it's also the science of social engineering. And that means, basically, the micromanagement of society. So in a nutshell, this is what technocracy is today. The mission statement really hasn't changed much over the years. There's a quest for economic domination going on in the world. There's a quest to change our capitalistic and free enterprise system into a resource-based economic system that focuses on energy. And it's basically really a complete transformation of the global economic system. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Of course, we got lots more to say beyond that, don't we?
Yeah, we have a lot more to say, but you know, that was well said. And so we're moving in that direction. I think that's what we want the listeners to gather, and that their eyes will be enlightened to see the direction that we are headed into. So technocracy has a global radical endgame. What is that endgame, Patrick?
Well, it does. Let's talk and split that kind of in half and say the end game for people, that you and me and our fellow citizens, is basically scientific dictatorship, the control over every facet of life, what we do, what we consume, where we go, who we associate with, what we're allowed to think even. And so that's as far as the people is concerned. As far as the end game of the global elite that brought this to us in the first place, it's a resource grab. And when I say resource grab, I'm talking about securing all the key resources on the planet. That would be timber, agriculture, oil, mining, everything that comes to the earth. The goal is for the global elite to get all those resources into their hands and then allocate them back out as they see fit to you and I living in the scientific dictatorship.
Wow. Yeah, you look at that and you see, okay, so that's where they're going to gain the power, is have to their access all the key resources in the globe, basically. And
That's
then
right.
and then it's up to them. So now we're looking at a different type of, quote, governance. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the show as we go along. And so the dictatorship that we may be seeing in other countries or whatever, whether it be kings or prime ministers or dictators, we're actually seeing a scientific dictatorship that is on the rise. But it's kind of it's an undercurrent, isn't it, Pat? And it's rising up, but it's not really something that we're used to, so we're not expecting it. Who are the main players behind the scenes, the founders and the technocrats?
Originally, back in the 1930s, it was scientists and engineers at mostly at Columbia University that really cooked up the economic model of technocracy. It died out. Americans rejected it pretty much by the end of the 1930s or early 40s. And it kind of went into disrepair for a number of years. But the concept was picked up again in 1970, 69 and 70, by Zbigniew Brzezinski. You remember, he's passed now, but Brzezinski was a co-founder of this organization, the Trilateral Commission, with David Rockefeller. And Brzezinski had written a book called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. And that phrase, Technotronic Era, really boils down to technocracy. I had to go back and reread the book when I discovered historic technocracy. And sure enough, it basically just warmed over. And not surprisingly, when Brzezinski wrote that book, he happened to be a professor at Columbia University.
That's interesting.
There it was.
And
I
you
know.
happened to be there.
Just happened to be there, and I'm sure he got an earful from some of the old professors that remembered what happened back in the 1930s.
That's interesting.
And he thought, that's an interesting idea. Well, David Rockefeller loved the idea, and they teamed up to create the Trilateral Commission. And the very first thing that they did, they said in the writings, was they wanted to create or foster a new international economic order.
Wow.
Nobody had really said that before, but that's what they said.
Yeah, and
here we are.
And here we are. And, we understand the term, New World Order. We've heard that. But this economical system or order is something that I don't know if we're looking at that first. I'm not sure, but we're going to be covering that. So what are the three focuses we will be covering on this program, Pat? And if you can briefly explain each topic or focus.
Well, exactly. We need to talk about how the governance system is going to work and what it means to us individually. And we certainly need to, talk about the physical manifestation. Like, for instance, why is cash being stripped out of society on a global basis? It's astounding, but it's happening all over the planet.
Yeah.
And then we also probably should take a look at the spiritual implications of the system that's being built, because this system does not, this is not the system that God controls, if you will. This is the world, if you will. Let's say this is the world, the flesh, and the devil, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And so this thing that's being built, this definitely has a spiritual dimension. that Christians need to pay attention to.
Yeah, it just seems like, of course, this is a man-made system which opposes everything that God has given us, and we're seeing this in almost every area of our lives. Why don't we just give a little bit of a synopsis of each one so that we know we're going to cover them in depth? But let's talk about this system, this economic system. You know, we know that it's going into a cashless society. We're seeing that happen right now. But where is that going to take us next?
Well, you know, I studied globalization for over 40 years now, when I originally started writing with Antony Sutton back in the 1970s. And kind of collectively, the term globalization fits what's happening, you know, what's actually been happening for the last 40 years. The globalization process. Now, economists are very comfortable using that term, globalization. And usually I think people just on the street will say New World Order when they think of it. But, you know, globalization is actually what's been happening for the last 40 years. It's been taking the entire planet and interweaving the nation states to where it kind of blurs the national borders, and it blurs the economic distinctions between countries. It means tearing down the tariff, the trade barriers, the tariffs, and so on, to allow so-called free trade to take place. Well, the globalization process, in fact, is technocracy. There's no doubt about it. In my mind, there's absolutely no doubt about it.
Right.
So here's what one global scholar has said about globalization. This is Dr. Parag Khanna. We've discussed him before, I believe. And he is a global scholar down at the U School for Public Policy in Singapore. He is a technocrat, and he's very, very well respected by the global elite. He goes, whatever he says, they're on the edge of their chair. I look at him personally as a young Zbigniew Brzezinski. He's that type of brain, brilliant guy. Well, he wrote a book called Connectography a couple of years ago about connecting all the world's cities together. And in that book, this is what he said. This is absolutely profound, and I think you'll appreciate it. This is a direct quote. He said, "We are building this global order, global society, without a global leader. Global order is no longer something that can be dictated or controlled from the top down." Now listen, globalization is itself the order.
That's scary.
This is different.
Yeah,
this is different, you see.
Yeah.
We're not building it from the top down. We're not trying to set it up for a global leader, per se. But the system of globalization is the order itself. And this is what people can't wrap their head around.
Yeah.
They're used to thinking in terms of a communist dictator, or like Stalin, or a fascist dictator like Hitler, or Mussolini, or somebody, the bad guys, whoever the bad guys are, we can get them, what are they, commies? Are they fascist or whatever? But how do you defeat a system? Like, this is a different mindset altogether.
Yeah, and that's why it's taken me years to wrap my brain around this. I'll tell you.
Well, I know. The system. People are starting to feel the system, though, Cindy, because they're feeling the pain, right?
Yeah.
As the net closes in around them, and their choices begin to be limited on what they can do or can't do, whatever, and they see what's going on in places like China, which is all over the news today. They start to feel the noose, if you will, around their own neck. And it's the system of things, controlled by algorithm, controlled by artificial intelligence. So, that's it in a nutshell, Cindy. I mean, this system is clearly worldly and demonic.
Yes, it is. We're going on a break. We'll be right back with Patrick Wood, so please stay tuned.
You're listening to Love for the Truth Radio. We'll be right back, so please stay tuned.
If you're a first-time listener, you'll find that on Love for the Truth Radio, we discuss news and views from a biblical worldview. We believe that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God and the absolute truth that should be applied to every aspect of life. We don't proclaim to have a cap on the truth, but we do have a love for biblical truth. So please, take everything you hear on this radio program to study and prayer. And thank you for listening to Love for the Truth Radio.
Welcome back. With us as guest, Patrick M. Wood. Pat maintains a biblical worldview and has deep historical insights into the modern attacks on sovereignty, property rights, and personal freedom. Patrick M. Wood is also the author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan horse of global transformation. Pat, where can we get your book? Where can our audience find your book?
Well, it's always available on Amazon.com, of course, but people can also buy a copy on my website, technocracy.news. And if they do buy on my website, I love to send out an autographed copy, just because I like to. But if you buy it on Amazon, of course, you can't. Now, Amazon, you'll often get free shipping, and you get it really fast. So,
yeah, in fact, I think you get it the next day. Or at least in many cases, next 2 days. But I have one signed by you. So
good.
Yeah. So get on to technocracy.news and get yourself a signed copy of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan horse of global transformation. You know, Patrick, let's paint a picture of how a global government will be ruled by the technocrats in a borderless world. I know we talked about that before the break, but let's get a little more detail on this.
Well, I know this. The question leads into a mindset that's hard to break, because we're looking at technocrats as people, number one, and we figure that they want to run, quote unquote, the global government, whatever that is. And we used to think years ago that maybe that global government's going to be somewhere in Europe, like Brussels, right, where the beast computer is located or something.
Yes, I was told that, absolutely.
I know, and so we've had this thought always, really, that there's going to be a dictator rise up, and he's going to take over everything, and he's going to be the person. But it's not a person, and it's not a group of people. It's the system they're building. They're using systems theory to create if you will, to transform the world into a giant computer algorithm. I don't know a better way to phrase it, but when you're caught up in that algorithm, you are ruled. You're being ruled. Let me give an example.
Yeah, I was going to say, please give me an example.
Okay, it's Saturday. You're reading the newspaper, or you're looking at Craigslist or something, and you find something that you really want to buy, and somebody's selling it for, really cheap, right? And you just, oh my gosh, I've wanted that for years. But it costs $500. Oh, I don't have $500 in cash. Everybody wants cash on Craigslist. So you go down to the bank and you put your card in and you withdraw cash. If you're lucky, you'll get $300 out. You might only get $200, depends on your limit. But you get $300. That's not enough. You need $500. So you think, darn, what can I do? You go down to another branch of your own bank and you put your card in, and it says, I'm sorry, you've exceeded your limit. Oh, shoot. Now you figure, I know, I'll go to another type of a bank, Bank of America or something that honors my card. I'll go over there, not my bank, but I'll put my card in there and I'll pay the $2 to get a fee, the extra fee to get cash out of that bank. Sorry, this is Hartline, you've exceeded your limit. And you go, how do they know that?
Wow.
This isn't even my bank. How do they know that I've exceeded my limit? Now, let me tell you, you could go to every bank in town and the whole county. Doesn't matter. You're going to get the same message on the screen. You've exceeded your daily limit. We're sorry. Try again tomorrow.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. All right.
Now, this is the system. Now, you can go into your banker on Monday, and you can complain and whine and whatever you want. And the banker will look at you and say, I don't have anything to do with that. That's all set, whatever. That's some policy or something that's just set. We can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
And they're right. They can't.
Right. They can't get into the computers, or it's not going to let them take anything out. That is, it's chilling almost, Pat. Seriously, because we're getting a picture of what it's like. So, all right, so we say we're ruled by the technocrats. We are, but we're ruled by the system, but still it's the technocrats that are putting the system together that knows
That's
what
right.
the system will do. So technically, we are being ruled by the technocrats, right?
You could say that. You could say that
Right?
technically, I suppose. They're the ones that are setting the policies
Yes.
and the algorithms in
Yes.
motion
Yeah.
that will do certain things. But remember, artificial intelligence today, Cindy, is
Yes.
it's advancing so rapidly that once the more advanced forms of artificial intelligence begin to learn on their own, they begin to make policies on their own.
Yeah.
And it goes a little bit beyond just the technocrats writing a program for something.
Right. Now, see, here's the thing, though. They know this. It's not something that it's something that they expect, but it's not something that they really want to happen. Correct? You know, I mean,
Well-
it's, you know, just reading into artificial intelligence, it's like sometimes these computers will talk to each other,
Yeah.
you know, in a code of some kind that's not known, you know, by the tech guys.
That's right.
Right? But
That's
the
right.
thing is, but it's not something that they're expecting to allow to happen, correct? Or is
Well, actually,
going
in
to
some
happen,
cases,
but,
in
yeah.
some cases, they are expecting it to happen, and that's kind of the point of calling it artificial intelligence. But let me just throw in a word on how their mind gets to this place. A technocrat believes that the only solution to any human problem anywhere in the world is technology. They believe everything is solved by technology. I just read an article today that talked about a PhD candidate was talking about poverty in the third world, you know, like in Africa and stuff. And he said the answer to poverty is to build smart structures and renewable energy and all this great stuff. You know, throw technology at it, and that's going to fix poverty.
oh, that's the answer.
Well, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
But everything that can be quantified as a problem, a technocrat would stand up and say, I have a solution for that. And it will involve some type of technology to be thrown at it, or, you know, some science or whatever. And of course, we know this is not true. It's a false premise to think that science can solve everything in the world. It's absolutely preposterous to most people. You know, if science came up with a dictate that love really was just a psychological phenomena, had no root, no basis in fact, how long is that going to hold up in society?
Right. That's right.
You know, you go home to your husband and say, well, I heard this on the radio today. It must be true, but you know,
Yeah.
but a scientist was on there and says, love is just a figment of my imagination. So I guess I've been kidding myself all these years. We've been
That's
married.
terrible. Oh,
Right?
my goodness.
I mean, whoa, wait a minute. You know, that's not,
Oh,
you
my
know, it's
goodness.
crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
And yet we're heading in that direction. You know, I think what really captivated me, Pat, was when I saw your podcast on Rest in Peace Democracy. It really caught my attention. And I want to focus a little bit on that because let's discuss the possibilities of this new government coming into fruition. Should the elitists find a way to get, let's say, Trump out of office? You know, like I know it seems like we're jumping into this, but, you know, this is what really captivated me. You know, was the possibilities of throwing out the government that we now know.
Right. It is disturbing, to
It's very
say the
disturbing.
least. The same guy we mentioned before, Dr. Parag Khanna, wrote a book early last year, called Technocracy in America. That's a nice title.
Yeah.
I told you he's a technocrat, and he really is. But he
Yes.
wrote this book. Yeah, and he says, basically, democracy is dead. And America especially, and the system is broken. And what we need to do is implement direct technocracy in America. So, thrill.
So, I mean, that's where we're headed, though. I mean, we're seeing that coming into fruition now, correct?
Well, we really are. And, of course, our political system is pretty shattered right now.
Yes, it is.
In a lot of ways. I mean, nobody can deny that. But it's a wrong premise to think that the only solution is to throw technocracy at it, as if that's a desirable thing to do. But the radical plan that that Parag Khanna wants is to push government back out to the states as much as possible, and then reform or transform the national government to suit technocracy. And that he starts with the idea that we should throw out the Senate, for instance, replace it with the Board of Governors. We should throw out the office of the president and replace that with a committee like they have in China, Committee of 7.
Yeah.
This is how a technocracy is organized. It has a structure of people, but the only reason those people are there are to make things happen, kind of in a pragmatic sense. Like somebody's got to man the sewers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
and make sure that the infrastructure stays working. They're just they're filling a human role to service the system that's being created.
It's being created, yeah. And we had a discussion on this before, but I mean, just to make this really clear, we're looking at possibly abolishing the Electoral College, right? Create a new cabinet structure, and to replace the Senate with the Assembly of Governors, like you said, let the Supreme Court modify the Constitution, which is happening. We see that happening now.
Yeah.
And I think you had said before, restore a strong federal service that knows how to run a country through scientists, of course, data management and analytics. So we're seeing how there's a changeover. Now, wouldn't this be interesting that this is one way of getting Trump out of the office? We're seeing such a divide right now in our country. It's like hard to get anything passed. Nobody's agreeing. We have the left and the right that's severely fractured. So I remember in our previous conversation, Pat, you were talking about Trump's infrastructure and how the decisions that he's making is actually forwarding the agenda that if he stays in office, that it's actually fulfilling exactly what the technocrats want to happen.
Honestly, I think that's true at this point. That doesn't mean that Trump is complicit necessarily, but nevertheless, he's doing things that suit the technocrats in their quest to build the system. And let me tell you why I say that. I know some people might get upset with me for saying that. But here's the deal. The word infrastructure, that has to do with roads and highways and rail and airports and fiber optic cable, stuff like that. Infrastructure. Infrastructure is a precious word to technocrats because it means connectivity. Connectivity is what connects everything together. And so Trump is pushing infrastructure rebuilding in America. Seems to dovetail.
And we'll be talking about that on the other side of the break. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Many would agree that we are living in unprecedented times. Grave immorality is on the rise, as in the days of Noah and Sodom and Gomorrah. There are wars and rumors of wars as nations rise against nations. Prophecy is being fulfilled as the birth pangs become quicker and harder. These are the signs of the return of Jesus Christ. There is one sign often left untaught. Jesus also told the disciples in the Olivet Discourse to take heed that no man deceive you. This warning applies to us too. Deception has infiltrated the churches through many false teachings and movements, making apostasy paramount. As contenders of the faith, we do our best to research and discuss these false teachings for you, the listener. Thank you for having a love for the truth.
Welcome back. I'm Cindy Hartline, your host. And in this segment, we will be talking about the global economic trends that support technocracy. With us is guest Patrick M. Wood, author of Technocracy Rising. Wood remains a leading expert on the elitist Trilateral Commission, their policies and achievements in creating their self-proclaimed new international economic order. And Pat, let me back up and say it's Technocracy Rising, the Trojan horse of global transformation is really the name of your book. Pat, why don't we reiterate a little bit of what you were saying before the break about the infrastructure?
Well, infrastructure is a key idea to technocracy on a global basis because it's about connecting everything together. China, for instance, has this massive multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road initiative that essentially is going to rebuild the old Silk Road between China and Europe. And this is an infrastructure project. It's going to touch many, many countries, that it goes through. It's going to be a huge economic boon to China. China will be able to dominate basically the whole area, the whole region, once it gets in place. But infrastructure is a byword that you need to be very careful with. So when anybody talks about infrastructure, you need to ask, what do they mean? What are they talking about? And everybody in America agrees that our highways and our bridges and stuff stink. They really do.
Yes.
That's only because the politicians have raided the highway funds over the years and spent it on every cockeyed thing you can imagine.
That's true. Yeah.
Except for highway maintenance.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we're still paying for those bridges, aren't we?
That's right. So we're all mad about our own infrastructure, thinking, man, why every time I hit that pothole, I got to get my tires aligned.
That's right.
Again,
Yeah.
So, but to a technocrat, infrastructure has something altogether different meaning. And it means opening up the borders and allowing transportation to happen, goods and services to happen between nations as if the borders didn't exist. That's one of the first things that, we think back to about 10 years ago. Actually, it's been 13 years ago now, when the Trans-Texas Corridor was attempting to be built by a NAFTA organization called the Peace Prosperity Partnership between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. That failed, by the way, miserably, and they abandoned it ultimately. But it was a huge infrastructure project to bring trainloads of containers that were unloaded in Mexico, deep in Mexico, straight through the border, southern border, straight up to Kansas City, where what they called an inland port. And then they would distribute those goods, those containers, whatever, to the rest of the country. So they put them on different trains and stuff. This was an infrastructure project that was purely globalist, purely technocratic, and just basically nuts. Any American would look at this and say, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I know they were going to trust the Chinese, to the people in China, to put an electronic manifest, a chip with the manifest of everything in that container, and it had to be like where it could be read by an automatic sensor when the train goes underneath the sensor. So they're going to roll the trains through the southern border like 80 miles an hour, and it go click, 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 and, oh, there's our inventory, right? Nobody asked the question, well, how can we trust the Chinese to do an inventory? I mean, they could be shipping nuclear missiles up here for all we know. I know, so it's crazy. But the person that was in charge of that border project was a lady, Undersecretary of the Treasury by the name of Elaine Chao. And her father is a shipping magnate. He's Chinese, based in New York City now, but nevertheless, one of the largest shipping companies in the world. And Elaine Chao is now the Secretary of Transportation.
There you go.
Under Trump. She's in charge of building infrastructure, right, in America.
Geez, isn't that interesting?
I have some very serious questions for this lady.
Yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, it just seems like Trump is unaware of this. I mean, if you look at Trump, the reason why they want open borders is for this very reason. And he's a man that wants to put up the wall. He's a nationalist. He's not a globalist, And so it seems like he would be unaware. Would you agree with that? I mean,
well, not quite. He wants the wall to keep out immigrants. Immigrants have nothing to do with trade.
Right.
So you have to ask the question, okay, immigrants are blocked. If a wall ever gets built, the immigrants can't come in. But what are all of the roads and highways going to be like coming up from Mexico and Canada, too, for that matter? Are they going to be automated where people, trucks, 18-wheelers and trains can zoom by with no checks or balances whatsoever, or will they have to stop at the border and may I see your papers, please? I can almost guarantee you it's not going to be may I see your papers, please. Almost. I haven't seen it yet. But right now, all those systems are still in place. And so it's a two-tier system, right? The border is closed to people. which is what the populist movement wants in America. They want to stop the flow of immigrants illegal immigrants coming into our country. But it's not, there is no wall for free trade, for the movement of goods and services back and forth across the border. Yeah. In fact, a good example of that, Phoenix, Arizona, right now, just a few miles from my house, as a matter of fact, there's a huge center being built by one of the regional airports here that is going to be a shipping hub for, I want to say maybe it's not FedEx, maybe it's going to be shared by a bunch of them, but it's going to be an inland port. Mexican authorities are going to come up here to Phoenix, and they're going to be their customs officials. They're going to be part of this facility. And this facility is going to ship goods and services down to Mexico and beyond.
Yeah, it's interesting.
In the same way that, for instance, in the same way that Amazon can deliver a book to your door overnight in many cases, right? Mm-hmm. They intend to do that in Mexico as well.
Wow. So
all of the whatever the forms, whatever going to be done up here in America, and they're going to zoom those packages down to wherever in Mexico, just as if it was an extension of the United States. Now, see, this is a double standard, isn't it? Almost.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah, I could see where it is because I mean, what else is going to be in those containers when they're shipping them back? I mean, not to say, but
well, that could be part of it. But my only point is saying the wall is going to block people, but it's not going to block so-called free trade.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we say that, but how many times have there been, like I said, people in containers or people in trucks or whatever? You know, you just
that's true too.
That's what I'm thinking of. You know, and what about the drugs coming in? You know, can they hide them in the containers? You know, so that's the thing that I'm thinking of. But that's very interesting. Well, why don't we move forward, Patrick, because I do want to get a lot done here.
Sure.
That I want to talk about the continuous push toward a cashless society and how technocracy is already supporting it. I remember you had mentioned to me a few things like the Apple CEO and whatnot. So why don't we continue in that?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. The idea of a cashless society is not merely supported by technocracy, it's driven by it. They're the people that are creating this system of cashless economy. Mm-hmm. And you will ask the question why in a minute, but we see it happening in Europe, all over Europe right now. We see it happening in America. We see it happening in China, which is almost all cashless in many places right now. And other countries around the world, other continents, is happening in Australia, New Zealand as well. And the idea is, the technocrat mind to this is, that cash can be hidden and hoarded by individual people. It cannot be controlled. If a person has cash, the technocrat has no control over it. That's aggravating to them. And they want control.
Yeah.
So the way to have absolute control over the economic system now, the buying and selling of goods and services, is simply to take cash out of society and replace it with an electronic system of credits and debits. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly the rationale that they're giving as well. Yeah. That, cash is cash is inconvenient. It's drug smugglers use cash, all these reasons, and you get right down to it. Those are all just straw men. All those reasons are just stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they want to get rid of cash.
You almost feel like you're doing something wrong if you have cash at your house, It's amazing. Well, but I see this. I'm just wondering, with this cashless society, they're collecting a lot of data as well as what you're buying, what you're charging, where your interests are. So am I right about that it's a lot has to do with the data that they're getting from the transactions?
It has everything has to do with the data. Mm-hmm. We used to say follow the money, follow the power back years ago. Today, that's not really suitable. It's follow the data, follow the power.
Yeah.
It's all about the data. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you have control over all the transactions, you have all the data. You can't, in other words, you can't collect data on somebody that makes a cash transaction for greenbacks.
Right.
There's no tracking it. You don't know. They don't know. That drives them nuts. They got to have it all.
Yeah. And you see when you go to the shop, right, or you buy food, and you can tell that they know they're tracking your data from what you're buying, what your interests are, because those are the coupons that you're now getting. They have this down to a science, so that's kind of creepy, actually.
Yeah, they really do. And let me consider what's happening in China. This has to do with the social engineering project. In China, China's implemented a social credit scoring system. Now, we have a credit score over here that's for money, right? If you have an 800, you can go out and buy anything you want in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. If you have a credit score of 300, don't even bother going to the bank. They'll probably lock the door and lock you out.
Exactly.
You can't even come in here, much less borrow any money. So in China, they've created this social credit system where they monitor everything that you do, what you buy, where you go, who you talk to, who your friends are, what you say on their equivalent to Facebook and social media. They know more about their citizens than anybody, than probably most of their citizens know. And they're assigning a social score to every citizen in China. And if they conclude, rightly or wrongly, that you're not a good little citizen and that you're not going to follow everything that they say, they put you on a special list and they start to deny services to you. Like, for instance, some people are unable, and they've done this to tens of millions of people already. You can no longer send your children to a private school, for instance. You can't travel to certain places anymore. See, they just pull away privileges if you're a troublemaker until you decide, gee, I guess I better change if it's possible to get out of the system. They'll press you down until you give up, until they will break your spirit. So you will toe the line and do what we tell you to do. So this is all done with data, Cindy.
Yeah, it is. Well, so what constitutes a good citizen? I mean, I'd like to know.
One that does not criticize the government, number one. And, one that does what the government tells people to do. And there's probably a whole lot of other things, but in a nutshell, those two things are just it right there. If you don't like them, they don't like you, and you're out.
We're going on a break. We'll be back with Patrick Wood, so please stay tuned.
You're listening to Love for the Truth Radio. We'll be right back, so please stay tuned. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, we read that men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, without self-control, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. They will be ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Thank you for having a love for the truth.
Welcome back. I'm Cindy Hartline, your host, and with us is Patrick Wood. Patrick, why don't we continue talking about economics here? We talked about the cashless society, how there's a big push on that, and actually technocracy is driven by data. But now I'd like to move forward, Patrick, on the universal income. I know that it's being devised right now and that the millennials seem to have a grand acceptance of it.
They really do. And this is also an initiative pushed by, again, the same technocrats that brought us a cashless society. Their answer to this, because, technology, artificial intelligence, and so on is driving people out of jobs in the next 15, 20 years like crazy. You've got autonomous vehicles on the road. You've got trucks, 18-wheelers that are all self-driving trucks now hitting the highways. I mean, you got fast food robots that take care of people in the McDonald's of the world. Labor is going to be turned upside down.
Yes.
The only answer that the technocrats offer is to create a universal basic income for everybody and essentially just give people money. And they're creating a class of unemployables. I call them unemployables.
Yes.
Because they simply won't have any ability to be employed. Nobody will want them. They don't have the skill set. So the technocrat says, let's just give them money. and we'll let them survive. The problem with that is, of course, is that it will create a slave class, the likes of which we've never seen in the planet before.
Wow.
Because once you get locked into receiving money like universal basic income, you'll never climb out. You will be a slave to whoever decides to give you the money, and you'll never have enough necessarily to buy all the stuff that you want or need, and it'll be a very difficult situation. So universal basic income is being pushed all over the planet right now. It's being experimented with in Europe in several countries. It's being experimented with here in the United States in multiple places as well. And they seem to be bent on implementing a universal basic income to take care of all the people who will be displaced by their technology, by their automation.
Yeah.
That's it.
You know what's so interesting is we have the millennials who seem to have a grand acceptance of it, like I had said. But these are students that have a lot more to offer as far as skill in their colleges and in schools than we did. You know, I mean, even in our own business, we're putting in television a whole set, studios, you know, for these kids. And they're learning that before they even get out of high school. You know, so, I mean, you know, I can't imagine what this is going to look like, you know, where they want the universal income. They're going to be told what to do. Are they going to have purpose? Are they going to do what they want to do? Are they going to have vision? Like, I don't understand. What is it going to look like?
Well, just imagine the welfare system right now that you have to go in and qualify for and jump through all kinds of hoops.
True.
You know, you got to know how to game the system to get into welfare. But a lot of people know how to do it. Universal basic income will just do away with all the qualifying.
Yeah.
If you're alive and you happen to be standing on American soil, here's your check.
Yeah. Wow.
That's it.
Wow. Yeah. It's so anti-God too.
It is. There is no purpose to anything. You know, you can't work. There's no need to work. That you'll have all the time in the world on your hands, and we know what Mommy used to say about having too much time on your hands.
Absolutely, they get themselves in trouble.
That's right.
Wow. Well, you know, Pat, I do want to move on because this is our last segment. I know that at one time technocracy proclaimed to reject religion, at least that's what I read. But presently, much of that view has changed in light of your biblical worldview. What is technocracy now embracing?
Well, you know, a person can say that he rejects God. Even an atheist says that, right? I don't believe in God.
Yeah.
Well, okay. You believe in something. You say that. You believe in something. You just don't you say, well, I don't believe in God. Technocrats rejected biblical Christianity, you know, decades and decades ago. But they still have religion. Their religion is scientism. And scientism believes that, you know, scientists are somehow superior to everybody else. And that all problems in life and all truth in life can be found through science. Nowhere else, only science. Scientism has been written about by many people, including the well-known C.S. Lewis. He wrote a lot about scientism. It's insidious, for sure.
Yeah.
But as a religion, it's flat out a religion. And you know, so they say, well, we're not religious. So I say, yes, you are. You know, let's just cut it right to the quick. You're religious. You're into scientism. Well, here's what's happening currently. This just caught my eye when I saw the article come out. There's an institute in California called the Esalen Institute. It's in Big Sur, California, beautiful place right on the coast, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And Esalen, back in 1962 when it was founded, was singularly the point of entry into America for Eastern mysticism. They're the people that brought yoga and meditation and things like that, you know, and popularized it in America. And a lot of the mucky mucks went down to Esalen. It's not a very big place, but they had a lot of influence. They had a lot of important people go there and learn the ways of Eastern religion. They took it back out to our country and spread it everywhere. And that is everywhere now in America. Can't find a town or hardly even a church that doesn't have something to do with yoga, for instance, anymore.
That's really
It's
interesting.
everywhere.
Yeah, it's a very small place. I mean, they couldn't hold a lot of people, so it's unbelievable how much they've influenced. But it was because of the type of people there, right, or the influential people or leaders that actually attended, right?
That's right. Well, they repurposed themselves last year, following a giant mudslide on Highway 1. That blocked both directions of Highway 1, cut them off from the outside world, essentially. And they repurposed themselves. They gave up the old mission of whatever the people they were serving, the hippies and so on, and they decided they were going to serve Silicon Valley. Because Silicon Valley was saying we have some problems here, and we'd like a place to go too. So Esalen became a center for Silicon Valley CEOs and important people, and the tech leaders and so on. And here's the pitch. I mean, here's why they're going. These people in Silicon Valley aren't sleeping at night. They have anxiety. Imagine.
Well.
And their conscience is bothering them because they're building these systems that are clearly anti-human.
That's right.
And it's giving them a headache. And some of them are questioning their values. Imagine that.
Yeah, my
They're
goodness.
questioning their values, like, oh man, I'm doing stuff that really is just going to destroy humanity. But what do I do? So Esalen says, come down here. We'll help you get in touch with your inner self. They call it your inner net now. They've changed the term.
Internet. Oh, okay.
Your inner, I-N-N-E-R.
Right,
your internet.
internet.
Right. And get in touch with yourself. And so they're teaching them new forms of meditation, like chakra meditation, which is probably the most rabid variation of just normal meditation, but it opens up the door for demonic activity in people. And so they're rushing into the arms, these people that have an attack of conscience. They're not turning to the Bible.
Yes, that's the problem.
See, to ease their guilt or to have their guilt forgiven, or to repent for that matter. But they're seeking after Eastern mysticism to make everything right in their life. And they're telling them just that. Oh, what you're doing is just wonderful. It's going to be such a boon to mankind. You'll see. Just keep doing it. Don't worry about it. Do your meditation every morning before you go to work. Take a long walk at lunch. Do your breathing exercises, during your breaks, whatever. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, what this Eastern mysticism practices, though, a lot of them lead to open doors, like you said. Yoga meditations of all kinds. So, and we're looking at these very influential technocrats, that may be influenced by the demonic spirits,
Yes.
So, this is very chilling.
Let me tell you just one little story before we run out of time. Eric Schmidt was a head of Google, right? He's now just the head of the parent company. But he was CEO of Google for many years, and he's a member of the Trilateral Commission, by the way. But he made Google into what it is today. And Eric Schmidt, when he was originally hired, back in early 2000s. The reason that he got hired, the ultimate reason that tipped the scales towards him, was because he attended Burning Man out in the desert in Nevada. And Burning Man, if anybody's ever heard of that, you go Google it, you'll find it real quick.
Yes.
That Burning Man is a paganistic ritual of narcissism out in the desert. And Eric Schmidt was a big fan of Burning Man. He went every year.
That's interesting. Wow.
That tipped the scales for him to get the job as CEO of Google.
Well, that tells
now, what
you
does that tell you?
Yeah,
See,
it tells you a lot.
I
know.
Yeah,
and we have had Carl Tykrib on many times about these transformational festivals and what they have to offer. And I'll tell you what, it's when I say transformation, these people go in, they don't get saved and born again. I'll tell you that right now. They get transformed into who knows what, and demonic influences. I mean, that's what we're dealing with here. So now we're talking about these people that are very influential, that are writing systems that will govern our lives, all right, that are not godly men who have consciousness. You know what I mean? Like their conscience are seared because of what they're doing.
That is the correct word to use, by the way. That's a biblical word.
Yes, it is.
That they have their consciences seared.
Seared. Yeah, and it's a wonder why they have to go to this Silicon Valley or this Esalen. Is that how you say it again? Esalen.
Esalen.
To get some kind of relief, because they are totally rebellious to what the Lord wants for us. And not to say, but this is setting the stage for the New World Order and just the Antichrist. I mean, the whole system is being set up. It's being staged for the mark of the beast. right?
It really is.
Yeah, I mean,
well,
it's clear.
It's getting set up for the assumption the system is going to be assumed by the Antichrist. There's, in my mind, there's no doubt about that at this point. We used to have all kinds of other ideas, but right now, what Prague Khanna said, that this global system is being built without a global leader, that tells you something right there. They don't know that they're waiting for a global leader, but he's coming.
Yeah,
the Bible says he's coming, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But their marching orders for now is, look, you build it, and I'll show up later. Thank you very much, right?
Yeah, I mean,
the system of globalization is the order itself that they're creating. And how easy will it be in time, just like in China right now with their social credit system, scoring system, how effective will it be if artificial intelligence can determine when you get saved, because all of a sudden your habits change radically, right? You start going to church, you buy a Bible, all that kind of stuff, and consorting with other Christians. And so how easy would it be for the system to figure out that you got saved? Well, pretty doggone easy.
That's right. Yeah. Or what your beliefs are. I mean, absolutely.
That's right. And during the tribulation, we know that Christians are martyred very quickly for their faith. This system would be the perfect execution mechanism to get rid of all those believers, because nobody really has to go looking for them. They'll self-identify. And once that they know who you are, it'd be easy to go pick you up and kill you. There was a reporter that went to China. I forget if it was from CNN or maybe one of the big newspapers. He went to China to see how good their facial recognition software was. And he went in a police station, took a picture of his face. He ran out the door he had a 20-minute head start, and then they started to look for him with facial recognition. They found him, the police found him, in 7 minutes flat.
Oh my gosh. Well, we'll be back in our last segment, so please stay tuned, and Patrick Wood will give you his final advice and contact information. Welcome back. I'm Cindy Hartline, your host for Love for the Truth Radio Philadelphia. Look us up on loveforthetruthradio.com. We air programs via stream every day. You can find program archives with contributors John Haller, Chris Quintana, Carl Tykrib, Patrick Wood, guests like Bill Koenig, Ray Younging, Johanna Michelson, Bill Salas, and Jan Markell, and many more veterans of the faith with the voice of truth. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, and on Rapture Ready Radio on Monday evenings on Blog Talk Radio with Jackie Alnor, along with numerous web radio programs who air us on their stations worldwide. Welcome back. Patrick Wood has shared with us a wealth of information in reference to our future government, economics, and religion. And, Pat, clearly the information you've given us is definitely the staging of the mark of the beast. Although I know a lot of people are saying, oh my gosh, what do we do? Can you please give us some final advice?
Well, I can. There's nowhere in the Bible that we're told to watch for the Antichrist. Not one verse anywhere. We're to watch for the return of Jesus Christ. And big difference there, right? So the things we're talking about, we can see how they relate to Bible prophecy and to that system that will exist during that 7-year period. But the reason that we talk about these things, even like on a program like this, is not to drive people to watch for the Antichrist to appear, but rather to be an encouragement that the Lord Jesus Christ is going to appear. And that is our blessed hope. We have no blessed hope in looking for the Antichrist. Heaven forbid. Who wants that?
Right.
We should be looking for the return of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Not
the Antichrist. And that's the best advice I can give to anybody. So if you're scared by all this stuff, here's a good idea. Get down on your knees and repent and come back to God because you're going to need him on your side.
We're going to need him. Yeah.
You're going to need to pay attention to him and only him. And, of course, the Bible says that all the way along. There's nothing that would contradict what I just said. But if this brings up fear in you, and it should in many people, all that indicates to me is that when the Bible says that perfect love casts out fear, if you have fear, what it tells me is that his love has not been perfected in you quite yet. But you can fix that. You can fix that real quick by turning to him and basically just placing your whole life in his hands, like you should have all along anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, amen. So that's great advice, Pat. Where can someone get in touch with you?
Everything I have in life is directed towards technocracy.news. All of my other entities from the past have been forwarded into that single place now. So technocracy.news, and people can go there and look at the quick start guide if they still don't understand it, or they can buy my book. Reading Technocracy Rising is really the answer to understanding this in detail. Don't think you know everything just because you listen to a 1-hour interview, because you don't. Trust me.
No.
But if you want to study it more, it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to study, because you know what? People out there in the world want to know. They want to know what's going on. Not only Christians, but non-Christians too. They want to know. If you can straighten somebody out and say, look, this is the way things are happening in America, and there's only one answer to that, and that is turn to the Lord. It really is it.
Amen.
Yeah.
It's time to turn to the Lord. Get a hold of that book. I have it. It's great. It's amazing. It has everything in it that you need to know about technocracy. God bless, Patrick. Thank you so much for being a part of our show today. And thank you, audience. God bless. See you next week.